All right, let's talk about that classic showdown, faith versus reason. It's a debate that's been raging for centuries, right? But today, we're going to look at it through the eyes of a real philosophical maverick, William James. See, James looked at this endless tug of war and thought, you know what, this isn't working. Instead of picking a side, he decided to just flip the whole table over and change the rules of the game entirely. So how on earth did he pull that off? Let's dive in. I mean, this is the fundamental question, isn't it? It feels like we're caught between a rock and a hard place. You've got science over here saying, show me the proof. I need hard, cold, verifiable evidence. And then you've got faith over here, which is all about taking a leap, stepping beyond what we can prove with our five senses. It really feels like a catch-22, a choice where there's just no easy answer. And for a long, long time, this was just a total stalemate. You were either on Team Reason, the evidence-based, tough-minded skeptic, or you were on Team Faith, the spiritual, tender-minded believer. There really wasn't much of a middle ground. And this is the intellectual gridlock that William James just waltzed right into, and he had no interest in playing for either team. And this is where William James's real genius shines through. He realized that getting bogged down in that old debate, trying to prove God exists with a scientific formula, was just a dead end. A total fool's errand. So he did something brilliant. He completely flipped the script. He asked a totally different question. What if the act of believing itself could be a perfectly rational thing to do, even if you don't have absolute proof? His answer was a resounding yes, and he laid out three incredible arguments to show us exactly how. Okay, first up, his pragmatic argument. Now, you gotta know, James was a huge name in this school of thought called pragmatism, and the core idea is actually pretty simple. The truth of an idea isn't some dusty, abstract thing. It's about what that idea does for you in your actual life. What are its real-world consequences? How does it change the way you live? So James kicked things off by noticing something about us humans. Our big philosophies aren't always born from pure logic. A lot of the time, they're just an expression of our basic personality. He said we kind of lean one of two ways. You've got the tender-minded folks. They're drawn to big ideas, optimism, religion. Then you've got the tough-minded. They only trust what they can see and touch, the hard facts. Which camp do you think you fall into? And here's the pragmatic punchline. James argued that picking between these two worldviews isn't just about what's true right now, it's about the future each one promises you. If you're a strict materialist, the story of the universe ends in tragedy. Everything just collapses into nothing. Game over. But if you're a spiritualist, the story promises that the good, the true, the ideal, that stuff gets preserved somehow. So for James, this isn't some boring academic exercise. It's you making a bet on which future you want to live your life for. That's pragmatism right there. Okay, but what about those moments in life where you have to make a call, but you don't have all the facts? The kind of choices that just won't wait for you to feel 100% certain. Well, that leads us right into James's second and maybe his most famous idea, the will to believe. Now, James wasn't just talking about any old decision, like what you're going to have for lunch. He was zeroing in on a very specific, high-stakes kind of choice. He called it a genuine option. And for a choice to earn that title, it has to hit three very specific criteria that set it worlds apart from our everyday decisions. Let's break that down real quick. First, the choice has to be live. That means both options are real, tempting possibilities for you. It's not a live option for me to become a professional astronaut tomorrow, Second, it's got to be forced. You can't just opt out. Not choosing is still a choice. And third, it has to be momentous. We're talking huge stakes, a one-time offer, a life-changing decision. To really get this, think about this classic movie scene. You're staring at a ticking bomb. Two wires, one red, one green. Cut one, you live. Cut the other, you don't. You have zero proof which is the right one. That right there is a live, forced, and incredibly momentous choice. And boom, there's the big insight from James. In that situation, what happens if you play the skeptic and say, well, I'm just going to wait for more evidence before I decide? The bomb goes off. See, by choosing to wait, you weren't being neutral. You made an active choice that led to a very specific result. James's point is that for a lot of people, the question of faith is exactly like that ticking bomb. It's live, forced, and momentous. Deciding to wait for proof isn't a neutral stance. It's a choice that shapes the one life you have to live. So this all brings us to a clash between two different goals we have in our heads. The super skeptical approach is all about one thing: avoiding error. It's the idea that it's better to miss out on a truth than to accidentally believe a lie. But James flips that around and asks, hey, what if the biggest error you can make is missing out on the most important truth of all? He says that in these genuine options, our main duty should be to seek truth, and that the fear of being wrong shouldn't stop us from the massive potential reward of being right. And that brings us to James's third argument. And honestly, this one might be the most fascinating. Because James wasn't just a philosopher. He was also a groundbreaking psychologist. He wanted more than just clever arguments. He wanted to see the data. He wanted to see how belief actually worked in the real world. And he found his evidence in a pretty wild place. Back in his day, there was this spiritual movement called the mind cure that was getting a lot of attention. It was full of people making these incredible claims that through sheer faith and positive thinking, they've been cured of diseases and psychological problems that doctors couldn't touch. Now, where a lot of people saw nonsense, James saw data. He saw a natural experiment in human psychology just waiting to be studied. Just listen to this. This is a real account James documented. This person went from being paralyzed, stuck in bed, to working as a healer for 14 years without a moment of pain, all because of what they called a resurrection through faith. James collected story after story like this, not as proof of miracles, but as case studies showing belief producing real, tangible, observable results. So the conclusion he drew from all this was simple, but it was also a philosophical bombshell. He basically said, look, if a belief can cause a real, measurable effect in the physical world, if it can heal a body, change a life, then the source of that belief must have some kind of reality to it. In other words, real effects have to come from real causes. He even had a theory for how it might work. Long before people were talking about Freud, James was fascinated with the subconscious. He suggested that maybe this hidden part of our mind is like an antenna, a channel through which some higher spiritual power could actually reach in and influence our physical world. So there we have it. We've gone down James's three different paths: the pragmatic, the existential, and the empirical. After all that, where do we land? What's the one big takeaway from his complete overhaul of what it means to believe rationally? It really all comes down to this. William James completely shattered the old, cramped definition of what it means to be rational. He said being rational isn't just about adding up the facts you have before you make a decision. A truly rational person also has to think about the kind of future a belief creates, the high-stakes nature of the choice itself, and the undeniable real-world effects that belief has on people. So, in the end, he gives us three totally rational ways to approach belief. You've got the pragmatic path, which belief leads to a better life and a better future. You've got the existential path, when you're forced to make a choice, what's the right call? And then there's the empirical path. What can we learn from the very real observable effects that belief has on human beings? And all of this leaves us with the big, challenging question that James puts right at our feet. If you're faced with a belief that could give your life meaning, purpose, and value, is sitting on the sidelines and waiting for absolute proof that might never arrive, really the most rational move you can make? That's the question he thought every single one of us has to answer for ourselves.